Hey there, this is Tom with the Diogenes Lamp podcast. I appreciate you listening in, and most importantly, I hope you enjoy what you hear. Before we start with today's episode, I'm going to ask you for a small favor. Believe it or not, history podcasts, especially in their early stages, tend not to be cash cows. Shocker, I know. I too was blindsided by this news. Now, I didn't go into this for the money, I think that much is obvious. But unfortunately, books, research materials, and equipment aren't free. Please, go to patreon.com/Diogenes Lamp Podcast, and for less than the price of a coffee once a month, you can become a member and get access to bonus episodes, recommended reading lists and documentaries, shout-outs, and anything else we'll offer in the future as this project grows. If you are especially broke, hey, I get it, but please, make sure to give us a 5-star review when you listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and subscribe to the pod on your preferred podcast listening medium. Your support is appreciated, and more importantly, it is needed in order to keep this operation going. On that note, I hope you have a great day, and now back to the show. The beer worker was already freshening up his establishment, and winds and blades of grass roundabout were already being stirred by the sun, when Voshev regretfully opened his eyes, which had filled with moist strength. He again faced the task of living and nourishing himself, and so he set off to the trade union committee to defend his unneeded labor. Administration says that you stood and thought in the midst of production. What were you thinking about, Comrade Voshev? About a plan of life. The factory works according to the prepared plan of the trust. If you mean a plan of your private life, you could have worked that out in the club or else in the red corner. I was thinking about a plan of shared general life. I'm not afraid of my own life. My own life's no riddle to me. And what could you have achieved? I could have thought up something like happiness, and inner meaning would have improved productivity. Happiness will originate from materialism, Comrade Voshev, not from meaning. There's nothing we can do on your behalf. You're a man without consciousness, and we don't want to find ourselves at the tail end of the masses. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Diogenes Lamp Podcast, Greek Civil War segment, episode 34, A Dead Welshman, Operation Animals, and a Trip to Cairo. This is episode 51 in the podcast as a whole, so woohoo, thanks a lot to everyone. That was a reading from one of my favorite books, The Foundation Pit by Andrei Platonov. It was a book that was heavily censored in the USSR, I think until like the 70s or 80s, probably until Glasnost, if I had to guess. You'd have to look it up, but it is a book about, really, in sum, it's a book about the liquidation of the kulaks, right? So, if you don't know who the kulaks were like peasants that owned land, kind of like middle class, petit bourgeois kind of. So, they quote unquote liquidated them, the communists when they took over, yada yada. The language in that book is similar to Ingsoc in 1984 by George Orwell, if you're familiar, in that it's very utilitarian in the way it is written. It is a great book. It's fantastically depressing as well. It's like very just bleak. Not in like depressing in the way that 30-year genocide is depressing, where, you're reading about people getting, literally chopped to bits, and like sex slavery in mass, and, just the massive genocide that was Turkey's Christian community in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It's not depressing in that sense. It's depressing in, it's just uniquely depressing. But it's a cool book. It's a good book. Would highly recommend. So yeah, can't say this enough, and something that I intend to say every episode. Thank you guys, the listeners, really, thanks a lot. Thank you to my Patreons, Rongta Wu, Darth Mater, Expat Frank, and Megas Yorgos. Thanks for your financial support. Makes a huge difference. This shit is not free, and it gets expensive. So you help make this project a reality. I am a regular Joe, an average Joe per se, in that I've not inherited extreme wealth. So this hobby, while it may cost not as much as, say, I don't know what an expensive hobby is. I don't know, name one. While it may not cost that much, it still does put a dent in the pocketbook here and there, so your support helps lighten up that dent, kind of buffing out that dent, if you will. So thanks a lot, guys, seriously. No bullshit. Thank you so much. I hope you guys are safe in these trying times around the world. We have listeners around the world, so if you guys are out there, please stay safe and keep your head up. Things will probably get way worse before they get better. But the Ottoman occupation lasted 400 years, and it ended. And all bad things end. All pieces of shit eventually die, whoever they are in office from around the world. No one or nothing lasts forever. And there's a lot of beauty to be taken with that. So keep that in mind if you're ever feeling down about the current situation. Things will get better eventually. Maybe not during your lifetime, or your kids or whatever, but eventually they will. So hopefully that lightened up your mood a bit. Maybe, probably not. Anyways, my Patreons, some of them have already received a gift from the pod. That gift being a favorite book of mine. Favorite books like Hezbollah by Augustus Richard Norton, a great book on Hezbollah, as you could guess. Not a long book. You can knock it out in like a month or two at a decent pace. Books by Kazantzakis like Christ Crucified, Zorba the Greek, or Report to Greco, or The Fratricides. Books like Greek Fire, Poison Arrows, and Scorpion Bombs by Adrian Meyer, which I'm halfway through and is a real page turner. Really great book. Anyways, you guys become a Patreon. I'll hook you up with a free book once a year, usually around Easter or Christmas time. So yeah, that's for now. That's the extent of what I can do. I know, like other Patreons on other podcasts, you get like a Discord chat or like whatever, and I'll get to that eventually because I do want to like create kind of more of a community thing. But for now, this is the easiest thank you I can do, and I think it's a substantial one because if you're listening to this podcast, there's a decent chance that you enjoy reading books. Because why else would you be listening to a podcast about modern Greek military and political history, right? Especially a topic as niche as the Greek Civil War. So thank you guys for your support. It's the least I could do on my end. Thank you so much. And of course, if you're listening to this, shoot me a message on either Instagram or Patreon if you have any suggestions, something you want me to cover in the near future. Do you have any qualms, any complaints, anything? I'll listen to you. I'll take into consideration what you have to say. Most of the time, I mean, everyone I've heard from is a very level-headed, great person, generally speaking. If you're totally batshit and you send me some really batshit stuff, there's a decent chance I won't listen to you. I might just say I will. Be like, yeah, that sounds great. Oh, thank you for your input. But I probably won't actually listen to you. But so far, everyone that's messaged me has been just, generally speaking, great people. Of course, I'm not a perfect person. There may be things I say that you don't agree with. I am just a dude that decided to create a podcast because I was bored. So, but send me your ideas, send me your complaints, anything you think I got wrong. I do make mistakes on here with dates and people and ideas and stuff. So, like, don't be shy. Send it on over. One last thing, I'm absolutely losing my fucking mind at this new Dune 3 trailer. Huge Dune fan. I'm actually a pretty bullshit Dune fan. I haven't even read any of the books. So, I mean, But the movies are awesome, and I've gone into a lot of Dune black hole stuff, learning about like the Tleilaxu and all that jazz. So yeah. So, where we left off last, there was a flurry of consequential developments. Ahndartes became the new collaborationist prime minister. The infamous security battalions were created. Hellas continued its rise to dominance within the Antarctico, which in turn guaranteed the growth of anti-Hellas forces. We're now in mid to late 1943, so maybe Q3, Q4-ish, for my friends working in corporate America or just corporate life around the world. As we know, by June of 1943, the international situation had shifted significantly. Just 1 month earlier, in mid-May, the Axis forces surrendered in Tunisia. These forces consisted of around 250,000 German and Italian soldiers, many of whom were veteran soldiers, mind you, which is a priceless commodity in wartime. So you get the idea. This is a huge deal. Also, think of it all just from a geographic standpoint. I mean, look at a map, right? The soft underbelly of the Axis forces in the Mediterranean, from the Balkans to Italy, were now exposed. Additionally, it freed up shipping lanes in the Mediterranean as well. All around, a big win for the Allies and a huge loss for the Axis powers. No need really to beat a dead horse or whatever. You guys get the idea. For today's episode, though, this development is important because of what it meant for Allied plans in the Mediterranean. What were those Allied plans? The Allied invasion of Italy, starting with the invasion of Sicily in July. Now, we know where this operation is going to take place, but obviously, you don't want your enemy to know where you're going to attack. Even better, though, than them not knowing where you're going to attack, is you convincing your enemy that they think or that they're sure that they know where you are going to attack, right? That's ideal. And the Allies would go through great lengths, successful lengths, to get this done. Let's talk about Operation Mincemeat, everyone. That is Operation Mincemeat. This is another one of those cool secret plots of deception that World War II is full of. In sum, British intelligence decided that they needed to convince the Axis forces that there was an upcoming invasion of Crete and Greece, and that the Allies intended to use an invasion of Sicily as a diversion to pull forces away from Crete and Greece. That's what they wanted the Axis forces to think. So, how do you do this? Enter Welshman, Glendower Michael. I believe I said that right. Glendower. I don't speak Welsh. He was a homeless man, aged 34, and most importantly for us, he was dead. He was a dead 34-year-old Welshman. A coroner's report was that he killed himself by taking rat poison, but this is a bit debated. Some historians say that he was just hungry because he was homeless, and he ate poisoned bread that was meant for rats, thus leading to his own death by rat poison. It just so happened, though, that the British intelligence just happened to be on the lookout for a dead man, a cadaver, really, let's call it at this point, whose injuries could be consistent with having fallen out of a plane with a failed parachute. And just like that, Glendower Michael was now Major William Martin. He was given a briefcase full of fake military plans for an invasion of Crete and Greece. To make the whole thing seem as authentic as they could, they went as far as to plant a photograph of his fiancée on him, along with a receipt for an engagement ring and a ticket stub for the theater. A British submarine dropped the homeless man turned major about 1 mile off the coast of Spain on April 30th. The body washed up, was found by Spanish authorities. German intelligence caught wind, picked up the intelligence, and voila. Went up the chain, up the Nazi military chain. But there are levels to deception, right? Sure, some dead guy washes up on the coast in Spain. He's got a briefcase, handcuffed to him. Wow, right? But what are things looking like on the ground? This is where a second operation would come into play. Operation Animals. Now, there had been some momentum or organization, let's call it, that had been leading up to Operation Animals. Last episode, or the one before that, or whatever, we mentioned briefly Myers and his national bands agreement that he drafted. but how Hellas didn't officially sign on to it until July. We'll get more into Myers, how he was faring in trying to unite the Antarctical bands in the mountains a bit later. For now, let's talk about the agreement as a whole. It had several components, some that we already mentioned, but there were some additional ones that we should cover here as well. For one, it attempted to put a temporary pause on the Antarctical movements killing each other. In addition, it gave official recognition to Hellas as an allied force. This gave Hellas a considerable amount of legitimacy, but also it served to drive a bit of a wedge between the other communist partisan movements in Yugoslavia and Albania. After all, if the British were worried about communism in Greece now, just imagine if that force linked up with other Balkan Communist Party movements. Lastly, and most importantly for what we're going to cover now, it provided the organization, and more so what I mean by that is the coordination, really, needed to get things done. Again, I'm referring to Operation Animals. So what is Operation Animals? I know I've mentioned it a couple times already. In a nutshell, Operation Animals was a plan to sow widespread sabotage throughout Greece in order to make it seem as if the British and the partisans, aka the Ahndartes, were softening up the area for an allied landing of Greece and Crete. The sabotage started on June 23rd, and by Myers' estimate, there was sabotage of some 44 major railroads in every direction, north-south, east-west, even routes like the super important route from Kalambaka to Yanina across the 5,500-foot Mazower Pass was disrupted, which was the only way the Germans could move troops from east to west in that region. Keep in mind, this is 1943 and railroads were all important, which even today they're really important in war. The whole variety of Antarctical bands did their part, but they did their parts separately, never in cooperation. By the way, while we're on the subject of groups that participated in Operation Animals, I wanted to make a correction to the previous episode. I stated incorrectly that Colonel Dimitrios Psaros of Ekoukoua EKKA was ambushed and killed in April of 1943. That was incorrect. He wasn't killed until April of 1944, not 43. With that being said, Psaros and Ekoukoua were almost eliminated by Hellas that May of 1943 and were only saved thanks to British pressure. Anyways, Ekoukoua, Ahndartes, and Hellas all took part in Operation Animals, which was by all means a great success. So much so that 2 German divisions were moved from Yugoslavia and another 6 from the Russian front to Greece. Keep in mind that a division runs anywhere from 10 to 20,000 men, depending on how up to strength they are. Also important to note that one of these units was a panzer division stationed in the Peloponnese. The invasion of Greece was so expected that General Rommel was brought in briefly to Thessaloniki to be the commander-in-chief of the forces there. By July 11th, Myers had received the news that Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily, had begun, and as a result, Operation Animals was officially concluded. And on July 18th, Rizospasis, the KKE newspaper, announced the Soviet victory at Stalingrad, and that soon the Russians would make it all the way to the Balkans. But Myers' work was not done. Far from it. We talked last episode about the National Bands Agreement that the SOE agents Myers and Woodhouse had drafted up, but how Elam and Hellas had refused to sign on. While Myers was working on this agreement, along with getting ready for Operation Animals, Hellas went ahead and attacked Ahndartes and Ekoukoua. This was obviously bad, for these bands were needed for a successful operation. So Myers, being the determined fellow he was, went ahead and tried to literally face Hellas by addressing a group of 250 Hellas Ahndartes and their political advisors. The presentation, if you want to call it that, where he tried to convince them not to attack rival bands, went terribly. He was aggressively heckled and insulted, so much so that Myers had to be escorted away due to his life being in danger. But by June 4th of 1943, Myers was able to get a conference together of Zervas of Ahndartes, Zimas, Sarafis, and Aris of Hellas, along with Woodhouse. The SOE proposal was that a joint general headquarters, or joint GHQ, could be established, with Zervas representing Ahndartes, Aris for Hellas, and Myers for the SOE. But Hellas was being stubborn. They drove a hard bargain. They insisted that all three of the Hellas leaders present must be its representatives, and that all decisions would be made by a vote. Obviously, this would mean Hellas would outnumber Zervas and Myers, which is not great. But Operation Animals was coming up, and this was a big deal. Myers sent word to SOE Cairo. They got back to him on June 17th with Operation Animals only days away, and pretty much told him that he had leniency to get the best deal he could. He tweaked the deal a bit, and everyone signed on, including Spyros of Ekukua, who were now no longer bandits in the mountains, but commanders of battalions, regiments, and divisions, under the supervision of the SOE and the Middle East Command. As Woodhouse put it, to be a soldier in an army was much more satisfying than to be an outlawed bandit, end quote. This rebranding also had the knock-on effect of attracting more officers who now felt more professional when they heard they could be commanding a division or regiment instead of a guerrilla group or band. Oh, and one last thing, or reality, let's call it, about this agreement, which is renamed the military agreement, by the way. This meant, in effect, that Eam Hellas was officially recognized by the British as the most significant resistance movement in Greece. After the flurry of sabotage and activity by the Ahndartes and Operation Animals settled down, and the realization by Ahndartes and the Greek population that liberation was not coming today started to sink in, Myers thought it important that the resistance armies of the military agreement be invited to Cairo to meet the big heads, the Greek government in exile and the British leaders. This suggestion came partly from Myers being concerned about how morale would hold in a time of inactivity post-Operation Animals, and how that could lead to the Ahndartes taking out their boredom on each other, as in killing each other. Quote, if their belief in their importance to the Allies was at any time to wane, the extremist leaders would take even less interest in the requirements of the Middle East Command and would concentrate correspondingly more on their political aims. It would be almost impossible for me to stop widespread clashes occurring between the rival movements, end quote. The delegation to Cairo started to take shape in July, when Piromoglu, Zervas' second in command, and Kartalis, the top leader in Ekukua, asked if they could join in on this trip. After all, Eam leader Tsimas, a known communist, was going. They were told to join the delegation, but the night before they were going to leave, Tsimas had to step away to meet an Eam emissary. When he returned, he was now accompanied with Tsiantos and 3 other Eam Central Committee members. What's more was that Tsiantos demanded that they all be allowed to join, or no Eam representatives would make the trip. Obviously, the absence of Eam Hellas, the largest resistance group, would make the entire venture moot. So Myers caved to the commies' demands. Myers and his delegation arrived in Cairo the following day, and the relaxing atmosphere of Cairo, or mostly just that of not being in a war zone, was very much enjoyed by Myers, who had a hot bath and a delicious breakfast. But unfortunately, that would be the high point of the trip for him. You see, Myers was under the impression that the delegation, or really this conference, would discuss primarily issues pertaining to coordination between the guerrilla groups and the Greek government in exile and the British. After all, this was what most of Myers' job was made up of to this point, being an SOE agent and all. But Myers was in for a rude awakening. Instead, the delegates of the Ahndartes focused all their energies on political issues. Their biggest demand was that the king remain outside of Greece until after liberation and until the Greek people themselves decided the route they would take in regards to the monarchy, as in have a referendum. Additionally, they demanded that the Greek government in exile include 3 representatives from the resistance organizations. After all, these were the governments on the ground in Greece now, right? Not the monarchy in Cairo. This was a lot for the Greek government to take into account. And so, what does a Greek king do? Well, of course, he consults Churchill and Roosevelt. And in that consultation, Churchill firmly told the king to reject these demands, and Roosevelt agreed. A bit less strongly, let's say, than Churchill, as Roosevelt's agreement with Churchill was against the advice of the State Department, but it appears Churchill may have been able to persuade Roosevelt. All other demands of the delegates were denied, with the only concession, or development, let's say, was that 2 American officers would be added to the military mission, which as a result changed the British military mission, or the BMM, to the Allied military mission, or the AMM. As we're going to see going forward, the OSS, or the Office of Strategic Services, would embed over 400 agents within the Greek resistance from August 1943 to November 44. And of course, the OSS is the precursor to the CIA. In sum, the Cairo conference was a train wreck, and the delegation was sent home in mid-September feeling betrayed and disappointed. To the British, it showed that the Ahndartes had a very different focus than they did, that being on political and constitutional questions like that of the monarchy. And to the Ahndartes, it showed that the British had little interest in what the Greeks on the ground actually wanted. And on that note, please join us next time as we follow up on the fallout from the Cairo conference, say bella ciao to the Macronades, and continue to move on to the inevitable civil war that will tear the Antarctical movement apart. Take care.